General Hospital spoilers reveal that Britt froze the moment she saw Jocelyn stepping into the marble atrium of Five Poppies. Sunlight dancing through the arched windows behind her like a celestial warning. The air shifted. Her heart hammered against her chest, not in recognition alone, but in pure, rising dread. 4 months. Britt had meticulously erased herself from the known world. She had let everyone believe she was dead, even allowing Liesel to burn an empty urn under a fabricated name to cement the illusion. It was the only way she could be free, from the legacy of her father, from the whispers of the WSB, from the pain she carried like a second skin. But all that careful silence shattered in a second when she saw Jocelyn, not as the grieving niece she once knew, but as a confident woman hand in hand with a stranger under a false identity. Jocelyn Jacks was here, alive, radiant, and unknowingly holding a match over the powder keg that was Britt's new life. The emotional shock of seeing Jocelyn wasn't just about recognition, it was an unspoken fear made flesh. Britt had stayed alive by trusting no one. By severing ties to everything that once made her vulnerable. But Jocelyn was different. Britt had saved her life once, and the emotional thread between them had never quite frayed. Even as the world presumed Britt was gone. Now. As she watched the young woman walk freely through the resort sanctuary, where secrets were currency and lies were survival, Britt felt the slow-burning ember of obsession reignite. She couldn't let Joss see her. Not here. Not like this. Not when everything depended on staying invisible. And yet, she couldn't stop watching. Every move Jocelyn made, every gesture of her hand. Every flicker of expression became part of a dangerous dance Britt was too drawn into. It wasn't curiosity. It was something deeper, uncontrollable, intrusive, and terrifying. This wasn't just about hiding anymore. Jocelyn's presence activated something feral in Britt, an inner alarm that signaled her exile was no longer secure. Every corridor now felt narrower. Every corner less safe. The simple routine of walking to her lab at the edge of the resort, once mechanical, now came with breathless pauses and frantic glances. Would Jocelyn see her reflection in a window? Would she recognize her from behind if she moved too fast or laughed too loud? Britt found herself avoiding public spaces. Trapped not only by the walls of Five Poppies but by the rising tides of her own anxiety. Her private sanctuary had become a psychological prison. Each minute ticking closer to the possibility of exposure. And yet, against all instinct, Britt couldn't bring herself to leave. She knew Vaughn's cover story was fabricated. She recognized the coded language, the way he spoke to staff, the practiced charm. He wasn't here for rest and romance. He was an operative. Like so many others who drifted through Five Poppies under the veil of legitimacy. But why was Jocelyn with him? Was she just a pawn in someone else's game? Or had she joined the game herself? The idea clawed at Britt's mind, making it impossible to ignore the need to intervene. But to reach out to Joss would be to destroy everything. It would expose not only her survival but the network of lies that kept her hidden from the WSB, from enemies like Sidwell, and from the painful truth she'd buried along with her past. Britt found herself rifling through Pascal's secured files, files she was never meant to see. But the obsession had taken hold. There it was, Jocelyn Jacks listed under a fake name. Booked into the honeymoon suite as Vaughn's wife. Britt's hands shook as she scrolled. Each word, each line, unraveling more questions than answers. What was Joss doing in this place? Who sent her? And most hauntingly, did she know Britt was alive? The psychological spiral worsened as days passed. Britt stopped sleeping. She avoided her lab. She whispered with Pascal about rerouting security cameras, manipulating schedules to avoid accidental sightings. But it was only a matter of time. Secrets like hers never stayed buried. And the fear that Jocelyn might uncover hers gnawed at her until it became an obsession not with protection, but with control. Britt wanted to know Joss's every movement. She studied surveillance tapes, memorized her patterns, tracked her down to which chair she liked by the garden pool. It was no longer enough to avoid her. Britt needed to understand her. To anticipate her. To predict when the moment of discovery would come, and to stop it before it did. But Britt wasn't just unraveling from the outside. Inside, a storm raged. Consumed by a purpose she couldn't voice and a terror she couldn't suppress. There were moments, brief, fragile moments, where Britt longed to break the silence. To walk up to Joss, to say, "It's me." To explain, to apologize, to connect. But then the obsession reminded her, exposure meant death. Not just hers, but possibly Jocelyn's. And so she kept quiet. Breathing through clenched teeth in the silence of her suite, watching from the balcony as Jocelyn laughed in the sunlight, unaware that just beyond her vision, a haunted woman watched her with a mix of dread, longing, and fury. This was not just a reunion. It was a collision of lives that had diverged, a violent intersection of truth and fiction. Jocelyn's presence was triggering in every sense. It confirmed that the past never truly stayed buried, and that even ghosts could be seen if the light was strong enough. Britt's carefully curated exile was crumbling under the weight of one familiar face. And yet, the most terrifying truth of all was this: she didn't want Jocelyn to leave. Her obsession had become her tether. In a world where no one knew her name anymore, Jocelyn Jacks was a cruel reminder that Britt Westbourne still existed, and that somewhere, buried deep beneath the lies, her heart was still alive, still breaking, and still hoping to be seen. Britt is spiraling through a storm of conflicting emotions and desperate priorities. Each one colliding violently within the walls of Five Poppies. While she struggles to remain hidden from the world that still believes she's dead. A more urgent reality weighs heavily on her mind, her battle with Huntington's disease. The clock is ticking inside her body, deteriorating her strength, her coordination, and eventually, her mind. But with the secrecy of her survival becoming more fragile by the day, Britt knows she must seize this limited window of autonomy to secure the one thing that might save her. Experimental treatment that only someone in her unique position, and with access to high-level resources, could obtain. Time is her enemy, but emotion may be her undoing. As Britt attempts to manage her physical symptoms through sheer force of will, a new obstacle emerges in the form of Jocelyn. The young woman's unexpected arrival at Five Poppies was already an emotional shock, but what's more terrifying is Jocelyn's curiosity. She saw Britt, maybe just a flash. A glimpse, but Britt recognized the look in Jocelyn's eyes, the slow dawning of familiarity. And now, Jocelyn is suspicious. She's asking questions. She's moving through the resort with a quiet vigilance, trying to confirm whether her instincts were right. And Britt knows that once Jocelyn reaches out to Jason or Sunny with even the hint that Britt is alive, everything Britt has worked for, every plan, every strategy, every fragile hope of healing, will implode. Because Britt doesn't just need time, she needs leverage. She needs the freedom to move in secrecy, to access private facilities, to negotiate research opportunities with the kind of scientific minds that don't operate under public scrutiny. If Sunny learns she's alive, he might try to help, but his help comes with visibility. Jason's involvement could mean protection, but it could also mean questions, publicity, even government attention. And the WSB? If they find out she's alive, they'll demand answers. Why did she disappear? Who helped her? What does she know? And most dangerously, what did she see before her death? The secret about her Huntington's diagnosis would be swallowed whole in the larger machinery of power, silenced in service of agendas far beyond her personal survival. Britt feels this web tightening around her. She can barely keep the tremors at bay, concealing the early symptoms of her illness from the staff and guests around her. Each interaction is a performance, calculated, restrained, desperate. She wears gloves to hide the subtle twitching in her fingers. She drinks herbal tea laced with stabilizers stolen from the resort infirmary. She limits her movement, avoids stress, and writes cryptic notes to herself in a journal she locks in a drawer. But it's not enough. She's breaking. And now Jocelyn threatens to break her completely. Britt's fear has mutated into obsession. She watches Jocelyn from behind tinted windows, records her schedule, analyzes her body language. Every time Jocelyn reaches for her phone, Britt imagines her whispering to Jason. Every time she steps outside the suite with Vaughn, Britt imagines her on a call with Sunny. The paranoia is maddening, but it's not without reason. Jocelyn is too smart, too intuitive, and most dangerously, too loyal to the people Britt is trying to stay hidden from. If Jocelyn reports her sighting, then everything Britt has sacrificed, her name, her freedom, her life, will have been in vain. And her last chance to slow the relentless progression of Huntington's will vanish in an instant. But there's a darker undertone to Britt's fixation. It isn't just fear. It's the realization that Jocelyn has power, unintentional, perhaps, but devastating. Britt once saved Jocelyn's life. Now, Jocelyn holds Britt's fate in her hands without even knowing it. And that truth, that reversal, torments Britt more than the disease ever could. Because in the cruel irony of soap opera fate, Britt has become the fragile one, the hunted one. The one whose life depends on the silence of others. Inside the sterile calm of her suite, Britt crafts contingency plans. She prepares for every scenario, escape routes, new aliases, bribery funds. She considers planting misinformation to throw Jocelyn off. She even briefly imagines confronting her, begging her to keep the secret. But she knows that one misstep, one emotional outburst, and the tremors she's hiding so carefully will betray her. Then there will be no more secrets. No more time. The walls are closing in, and Jocelyn is unknowingly tightening the noose. Britt isn't just facing the inevitable march of her illness, she's facing the collapse of her world. And the terrifying truth is, she doesn't blame Jocelyn. She's just a girl looking for answers. It's Britt's own lies, her own choices, that brought her to this edge. And yet, despite it all, Britt isn't ready to die. Not yet. She has research to finish, treatments to try, a life to salvage. But to do any of that, she must silence the noise around her. She must buy more time, more space, more freedom to be sick without being exposed. The irony is cruel. In order to live, she must remain invisible. In order to heal, she must stay hidden. And in order to save herself, she may have to destroy the one bond that reminded her she was ever worth saving in the first place. The obsession grows. The fear deepens. And the disease waits patiently beneath her skin. Britt was never prepared to face Jocelyn again, not like this. Not in the isolation of the Five Poppies resort, where every corridor echoed with secrets and every guest might be a spy or a ghost from the past. The moment her eyes locked on Jocelyn across the marble-floored lobby, her breath stopped, her body froze. And a cold wave of dread crashed over her like a tidal wave laced with old guilt and unspoken trauma. Jocelyn's presence wasn't just unexpected, it was catastrophic. Britt had spent months hiding, rebuilding what was left of her shattered existence after the world presumed her dead. Her mother burned her memory to ash, and the man she once loved had been too late to save her. But now Jocelyn was here, not as a grieving daughter or a concerned friend, but as something altogether more dangerous, an agent of disruption. Perhaps unknowingly manipulated by forces beyond her control, perhaps unknowingly drawing Britt back into the light, the exposure, the danger she had so carefully evaded. This wasn't just a reunion, it was a disaster. The depth of Britt's panic wasn't simple fear, it was layered with the complexity of everything she had sacrificed to stay hidden. To live a life free of the WSB's manipulation, and perhaps most importantly, to avoid unleashing the dormant chaos that would surely ignite the moment Jason or Sunny learned she was alive. But Jocelyn being here changed everything. This wasn't coincidence. It was a collision. Jocelyn's movements, her questions. The way she walked past the spa and glanced too long at the receptionist, it all suggested she wasn't on vacation. She was working. Hunting. And Britt was her target. That realization clawed its way through Britt's chest, tearing open wounds she had tried desperately to seal shut. Worse yet, her body was betraying her. The tremors from Huntington's were worsening under stress, her reflexes sluggish, her hands unsteady as she attempted to blend in among the guests. The very disease she had tried to hide from the world was now threatening to give her away at the worst possible moment. And Jocelyn, sharp-eyed, emotionally charged, obsessed with justice and loyalty, would see it. She would piece together the timeline, the inconsistencies, the look in Britt's eyes. And then she would call Jason. Or worse, Sonny. The very men whose presence would collapse the fragile shelter Britt had built around herself. But what haunted Britt most wasn't the risk of being caught. It was the risk of being wrong. What if Jocelyn wasn't here for her? What if she had come as part of a deeper operation, perhaps investigating Dalton? Perhaps trying to root out the quiet experiments that had poisoned this resort long before Britt ever arrived? What if Jocelyn had become a weapon? Sharpened by grief and molded by anger into something brittle and relentless? That possibility unsettled Britt more than anything. Because she remembered the girl who used to smile at her. The one she had once pulled from the jaws of death. But that girl was gone. And in her place was someone much more dangerous, a woman with a mission and no mercy. Britt couldn't afford to make assumptions anymore. She had to regain control. Fast. But there was a complication she hadn't counted on, her emotions. Seeing Jocelyn awakened something in her that had been dormant, affection, guilt, maternal instinct, maybe even a kind of desperate longing to be forgiven. She wanted to reach out, to explain. To tell Jocelyn why she disappeared, why she stayed gone, why she didn't trust herself to return. But she knew what would happen if she did. It would all come undone. And yet Jocelyn wasn't backing down. She was making calls, leaving cryptic messages, wandering the restricted parts of the resort, asking staff the wrong questions. And Britt, terrified of what might come next, began intercepting her paths, listening through walls, deleting messages from resort systems. She couldn't keep it up forever. And the Huntingtons was making it harder by the hour. The shaking wouldn't stop. Her vision blurred at critical moments. She found herself hiding in bathrooms just to breathe. But she didn't stop. Because somewhere in that sickness and fear, a new obsession had taken hold. Jocelyn had to be protected. From herself, from Dalton, from the truth. Britt began sabotaging her own cover just to protect Jocelyn. She redirected surveillance, deleted footage. Even misled Pascal, Dalton's manipulative concierge, into believing Jocelyn was a harmless tourist. But that only bought time. And time was running out. Because Jocelyn was getting closer. She'd found Britt's name on an old prescription in the resort pharmacy. She'd overheard a conversation between Britt and a lab tech. She'd seen the trembling in Britt's hands and the sadness in her eyes. And she wasn't going to let it go. She cornered Britt by the back gardens one night, under a canopy of lanterns. The soft hum of evening barely masking the fury in her voice. Britt wanted to lie. To pretend she was someone else. But instead, she ran. And that run, staggered, desperate, and clumsy, told Jocelyn everything she needed to know. The next day, Jocelyn reported to Jason. And Jason was already in Paris, waiting. The walls were closing in. Dalton knew it. Pascal had gone silent. And Britt? She was spiraling. The disease. The memories. The regret. The fear. All of it mixed together into a storm she could no longer outrun. She packed a bag. She wrote a note. She considered disappearing again, truly, forever. But something stopped her. Maybe it was the way Jocelyn cried when she found her that night. Maybe it was the way she said, "I never stopped believing." Or maybe it was the brutal truth that for all her secrets and sins, Britt didn't want to be alone anymore. Not like this. And so she stayed. And by staying, she lit the fuse. Because now Jason is coming. Sonny is coming. And Dalton is preparing for war. And in the middle of it all, two women obsessed with different versions of the truth are about to learn what happens when you try to control a story that was never yours to begin with. There will be fallout. there will be casualties. And the only question left is whether either of them will survive what comes next. Britt is now holding some of the darkest and most dangerous secrets ever left behind by Faison, secrets that were never meant to survive him, but have been kept alive in encrypted files. Hidden research, and the scarred memories of a daughter who never truly escaped his shadow. While the world believes she died at the hands of Heather, Britt has gone underground, choosing exile over exposure. Her sudden appearance at the Five Poppies resort is not by chance, it is part of a last-ditch effort to find treatment for her Huntington's disease. All while protecting the knowledge that could unleash chaos across the WSB and beyond. Her silence is not cowardice, it is strategy, desperation, and a twisted form of responsibility. But her control is unraveling fast, especially now that she has come face to face with Jocelyn. Seeing Jocelyn at the resort jolts Britt into a spiral of conflicting emotions, fear, guilt, protectiveness, and paranoia. Jocelyn, now a trained WSB agent, might unknowingly be part of a larger game, used by Vaughn or Dalton or even Sunny in ways she doesn't yet realize. Britt can't let her guard down, but she also can't bear the idea of Jocelyn falling into the same deadly cycle she once did. And still, Jocelyn's presence stirs a deep unease in Britt, a sign that her carefully constructed plan to stay invisible is no longer viable. Jocelyn is trying to reach Jason and Sunny. If either of them gets wind that Britt is alive, everything will collapse. Not just her life, but the fragile grip she has on the dangerous information she's protecting. This is no longer just about Britt surviving her disease, it's about containing a legacy. Faison's encrypted files, the last remnants of Project Omega, and the experimental data tied to mind control, cloning, and bioweapon development, are all still intact and buried in a hard drive hidden beneath a loose floor tile in Britt's lab quarters. The Five Poppies resort was meant to be her final refuge while she searched for a private lab to continue decoding Faison's work, perhaps even to find a cure for Huntington's. But now, her time has run out. Jocelyn's unannounced presence has cracked open a door Britt was determined to keep sealed. Britt is not just hiding. She's being hunted, by truths she can no longer contain. By the deterioration of her own body, and by the emotional weight of watching someone like Jocelyn walk the very path she's been trying to burn behind her. The obsession is growing, not just to protect the secrets, but to control how and when they are revealed. Every interaction with Jocelyn is a calculated risk. And yet, Britt feels drawn to her. As if fate is positioning Jocelyn as the heir to a burden no one should inherit. This is the madness Britt never asked for but now must navigate. The presence of Jason looms large as well. He's closing in, possibly tipped off by Joss or another source. And Liesel, believed to have cremated Britt's body, is beginning to suspect something is off. If Liesel discovers the deception, Britt may lose her last remaining ally. And if Jason reaches her first, she'll be forced to decide whether to run again or finally share what she knows, even if it costs her everything. Meanwhile, Dalton's network is tightening around the resort, and Pascal, once thought to be neutral, is behaving more like a gatekeeper than a concierge. Britt's paranoia is justified. She's beginning to suspect the staff is watching her. She's intercepted strange communications on the resort's secure Wi-Fi. She found someone snooping near her lab suite late at night. Her illness is progressing, making concentration harder, her reflexes slower. But her instincts remain razor sharp. And they're telling her that time is nearly up. Jocelyn, oblivious to the full scope of Britt's predicament, just wants to help. But her loyalty to Jason and Sunny makes her a liability. If she discovers even a fraction of what Britt is hiding, about Project Omega, the false deaths, or the WSB's involvement in global manipulation, she might run to Jason without hesitation. Britt knows this. And so, she tries to avoid her. But the resort is small, the stakes are massive, and their paths are crossing more frequently. Joss senses Britt is keeping something enormous from everyone, and her persistence may force a confrontation Britt isn't ready for. At the core of all this is a new obsession, control. Control over her failing body. Control over Faison's secrets. Control over who learns the truth and when. But that control is slipping. Every move Jocelyn makes. Every phone call to Jason or coded message sent to Sunny, threatens to unravel the delicate balance Britt has maintained. And as the past begins to collide with the present, the old ghost of Faison starts to feel more alive than ever. The obsession is mutual now. Britt watches Joss with a mix of dread and admiration. Haunted by the idea that the young woman could succeed where she failed, or die trying. The further this goes, the more dangerous the game becomes. Vaughn is not just a bodyguard, there's more to him than anyone realizes. The honeymoon suite Jocelyn shares with him is likely wired. And Britt is beginning to suspect the Five Poppies resort itself was never neutral ground but a controlled environment meant to observe her, contain her, maybe even manipulate her. What was once a secret retreat has become a battlefield of mines, betrayals, and ticking time bombs. And somewhere in the middle of it, Britt is beginning to understand that she might have only one real chance left to define her legacy, by confronting Jocelyn face to face, giving her the truth, and preparing her for the consequences. But whether she has the strength, or the courage, to do that before the disease claims her or the WSB silences her forever is the question that now haunts every breath she takes.